I first saw Jake at the gym. I was 64, married for over 40 years to a man who had long ceased to be my romantic partner. My husband Richard was a good man in many ways, but our marriage had dwindled into a routine of cordial indifference. We were like two parallel lines existing side by side but never really connecting. I still remember that day at the gym clearly, the way Jake moved with an effortless grace, his youthful energy a sharp contrast to my own weariness. Jake was 22, young and vigorous, and his presence felt almost magnetic. He had an intensity in his eyes, a fire that was impossible to ignore. I found myself drawn to him in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I'd catch myself watching him from across the room, feeling a mix of excitement and guilt. It was wrong, but it was also thrilling. I was determined to get his attention. The first time I approached him it was casual, a simple comment about how well he was lifting weights, but it was the way I said it, the light touch on his arm, that was meant to convey more than mere friendliness. Jake was polite, smiling as he replied, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something I took as curiosity, or perhaps even interest. Over the next few weeks I became more deliberate. I changed into workout clothes that accentuated my figure, subtle but revealing enough to be provocative. I'd often find reasons to be near him, striking up conversations and gently touching his arm or shoulder. During our exchanges I'd watch his reaction closely, noticing the way he'd stiffen or try to maintain his composure. It was a game one I was both excited and apprehensive about. Despite my efforts, Jake was elusive. He was always polite, always engaging, but never crossing the line. He would laugh at my jokes, but there was a noticeable distance that kept me guessing. His responses were measured, never encouraging, yet not dismissive. It was as though he was playing a game of restraint, and the more he held back, the more I wanted to push the boundaries. I'd find myself daydreaming about him, imagining scenarios where he'd finally give in. I started to crave our encounters, looking forward to seeing him at the gym, waiting for that brief but charged interaction. Each day my anticipation grew, fueling my desire. One day, after an intense workout, I decided to take a different approach. I had just finished my session and was wiping off sweat when Jake approached. I was wearing a form-fitting tank top and shorts, the material clinging to me in a way I hoped would catch his eye. I could see him glancing at me as he approached, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hey Jake," I said, trying to sound casual but feeling the undercurrent of tension between us. "You've been working hard. How about a smoothie after this?" He looked at me with that same unreadable expression, but I saw a spark of something in his eyes. "Sure, that sounds good," he replied, his voice steady. We went to the smoothie bar together and the conversation was light, filled with the usual banter, but I could sense a shift. There was an edge to his responses, a slight change in his demeanor. I decided to test the waters further. As we stood close to each other, I let my hand brush against his, my fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. He didn't pull away, but his gaze was fixed on the counter, his face a mask of concentration. The real breakthrough came a few days later. I had invited Jake to my house for dinner under the pretense of getting to know him better. Richard was away on one of his frequent business trips, leaving me alone to plan an evening that I hoped would be both memorable and revealing. I spent hours preparing the meal, dressing in a soft, elegant dress that I knew would highlight my curves. When Jake arrived, he looked surprised but pleased. We sat down to a sumptuous dinner, and the atmosphere was filled with warmth and a hint of something more. The conversation flowed easily, but I noticed how often Jake's gaze would wander over me, lingering on my dress and the way it accentuated my figure. After dinner we moved to the living room. I had arranged it to be cozy and intimate, with soft lighting and comfortable seating. I poured us both glasses of wine and we settled on the couch. I could feel the tension building between us, a palpable energy that crackled with every touch. As the evening wore on, I found myself inching closer to Jake. Our conversation became more personal, more intense, and I could see his restraint starting to falter. His hand brushed against mine as he reached for his wine glass, and I took that as a sign. I leaned in slightly, my shoulder touching his. I could feel his breath quicken, and I knew he was feeling the same electric current that I was. I allowed my hand to rest lightly on his thigh, my fingers gently caressing the fabric of his jeans. Jake's breathing grew more ragged, and he looked at me with a mix of desire and hesitation. Finally, I decided to take the plunge. I turned to him, my eyes locked onto his, and slowly leaned in. Our lips met in a kiss that was both tender and filled with urgency. It was as though all the pent-up longing and anticipation had been channeled into that one kiss. Jake responded with equal fervor, his hands cupping my face as he deepened the kiss. When we finally pulled away, both breathless, I saw the look of satisfaction in Jake's eyes. It was clear that he was as eager as I was to explore what was unfolding between us. I could sense his resolve crumbling, replaced by a powerful desire that matched my own. The following weeks were a whirlwind of passion and secrecy. Each encounter with Jake was charged with excitement and a sense of danger. We continued to meet at my house each time, with a growing sense of intimacy and connection. The physical contact became more frequent and more intense. We'd share lingering kisses, touch each other with increasing boldness, and find ways to be alone together whenever possible. Our interactions at the gym took on a new dynamic. Each touch, each glance was laden with meaning, a reminder of the secret we were keeping. The thrill of our affair was intoxicating, and the fact that it was hidden from Richard only added to the excitement. Jake played his part with enthusiasm, his youthful energy contrasting with my more experienced approach. He was a perfect combination of eagerness and restraint, and it drove me wild. One memorable night, Jake stayed over at my house. We had spent the evening dining and talking, our conversation becoming increasingly intimate. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where the mood was relaxed and the lighting soft. Jake's hand brushed against mine, and I felt a familiar thrill run through me. We sat close on the couch, our bodies almost touching. I could sense his anticipation, the way he seemed to be waiting for me to make the next move. I let my fingers lightly trace his arm, enjoying the way his muscles tensed under my touch. As the night wore on, our kisses grew more passionate. I pulled him closer, our bodies pressed together, and we explored each other with a mix of urgency and tenderness. We ended up in my bedroom, where the intimacy reached its peak. The physical connection was exhilarating, and each touch seemed to deepen our bond. Despite the intense connection we shared, the affair was not without its complications. There were moments of guilt and doubt, moments when I questioned the morality of what we were doing, but those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the powerful emotions that Jake stirred in me. The secrecy of our relationship only heightened the tension. I had to be constantly vigilant, ensuring that Richard never suspected anything. There were nights when I would lie awake, my mind racing with thoughts of Jake and the thrilling, dangerous affair we were involved in. I also noticed Jockey becoming more confident in his deeds. He would often tease me, his playful touches and comments driving me to the edge. It was clear that he enjoyed the power he had over me, and it added an exciting layer to our relationship. One evening, Jake came over after a particularly stressful day at the gym. He was agitated, his usual composure replaced by a sense of urgency. We quickly fell into each other's arms, our kisses fierce and desperate. It was clear that the tension had built to a breaking point, and the release was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Our bodies moved together with a fervor that matched the intensity of our emotions. The passion we shared was both physical and emotional, a culmination of all the longing and anticipation that had built up over weeks of secret meetings. Afterward, we lay together, the room filled with the soft sounds of our breathing. Jake looked at me with a mixture of satisfaction and longing. I never knew it could be like this, he said softly. I smiled, my heartful neither did I, but it's been incredible. As the affair continued, I found myself increasingly torn between the excitement of my relationship with Jake and the reality of my marriage. Richard remained oblivious to the secret life I was leading, and I struggled with the conflicting emotions that came with living a double life. Each encounter with Jake was a whirlwind of passion and discovery, yet the guilt of deceiving Richard weighed heavily on me. Our meetings became more frequent, each one charged with the same intensity that had initially drawn us together. We would steal moments of intimacy wherever we could, sometimes at my house, other times in secluded spots that offered us a temporary escape from the world. The thrill of our clandestine affair never waned, and Jake's youthful exuberance contrasted sharply with the stagnant routine of my married life. Jake's assertiveness grew, as did his emotional investment. He was no longer just the eager lover he was becoming someone I deeply cared about. Our conversations grew more intimate, touching on dreams, fears, and the complexities of our lives. He started to question the future, asking me about what I wanted not just in our relationship but in my life overall. These conversations were both exhilarating and terrifying. Jake's probing questions made me reflect on the choices I had made and the life I was living. One evening, after a particularly emotional conversation, Jake took my hand and led me to a quiet, secluded spot in the garden. The soft moonlight bathed us in a gentle glow, and I felt a profound sense of connection as we stood together. The emotional depth of our relationship was becoming clearer, and the lines between physical attraction and genuine affection were blurring. Jake's fingers traced the lines of my face as he gazed at me with a mix of admiration and concern. "What are we doing, Marie?" he asked softly. "I know this is intense and I can see how much it means to you, but where is this going? What do you want?" His question hit me hard. I had been so consumed by the excitement and the secrecy that I hadn't fully considered the long-term implications of our affair. I felt a wave of vulnerability as I realized that Jake was not just a fleeting distraction but someone who had become a significant part of my life. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined it would get to this point. I was just looking for something different, something that made me feel alive again, but now I have to think about what this means for both of us." As the days went by, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with the implications of our affair. Jake's question echoed in my mind, and I knew I had to confront the reality of my situation. Richard's return from his business trip added to my anxiety. I had to maintain the facade of a happy wife even as I was torn by my secret life. One night Richard came home earlier than expected. I was in the midst of a heated conversation with Jake over the phone when Richard walked in. I quickly ended the call, my heart racing as I faced him. Richard looked at me with curiosity, sensing something was amiss, but unable to pinpoint what it was. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant. "Yes, just had a long day. I was talking to a friend." Richard seemed satisfied with my answer, though I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes as I watched him go about his evening routine. I felt a pang of guilt and confusion. The life I had built with Richard was one of stability and familiarity, but it was also one of unfulfilled dreams and unspoken regrets. Jake had brought a whirlwind of passion into my life, but at what cost? Jake and I continued to see each other, but the emotional weight of our affair became harder to bear. The thrill of secrecy and the joy of our encounters were tempered by the growing realization that we needed to address the future of our relationship. We had reached a crossroads where we had to decide whether to continue living in this heightened state of emotional turmoil or to confront the reality of our situation. One afternoon we met at a secluded park, a favorite spot of ours for its tranquility and privacy. Jake was unusually quiet as we sat together on a bench, his hand clasped in mine. I could sense the seriousness in his demeanor, and it mirrored my own inner turmoil. "Marie," he began, his voice serious, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we want and what this means. I care about you deeply, but I can't keep going like this. It's tearing me apart, and I know it's affecting you too." I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "I know," I said softly. "I've been thinking about it too. I never imagined that things would get so complicated. I care about you so much, but I'm also living a life that's not easy to walk away from." Jake took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. "I want to be with you, Marie. I want us to have a future together, but we need to figure out how to make that happen. It's not fair to either of us to keep living in this limbo." The decision was not an easy one. I had to confront the reality of my marriage and make a choice about my future. Richard was a good man, but our marriage had lost its spark long ago. Jake offered a new beginning, a chance to rediscover passion and connection, but leaving Richard was not something I could do lightly. After many sleepless nights and heartfelt conversations with Jake, I made the difficult decision to end my marriage. It was a painful and emotional process filled with moments of doubt and regret. Richard was devastated, but he understood that our marriage had reached its end. Jake and I began a new chapter, building our relationship on a foundation of honesty and shared experiences. The transition was challenging, but we faced it together. The Affair that had started as a secret indulgence became the basis for a new beginning, one that was filled with both promise and uncertainty. In the end, our relationship was a testament to the power of passion and the complexity of human connections. It was a journey of self-discovery and transformation, one that brought both joy and heartache. As we moved forward, we embraced the lessons learned and the love we had found in each other. It was a Saturday afternoon, just like any other. I'd been tinkering around in the garage for hours working on my bike. I'm 20 now, living with my dad after he got remarried to Linda, a woman almost 3 times my age. Linda's 60, but you wouldn't know it by looking at her. She's full of life with this elegance that you just can't ignore. I had no idea that this day would be anything but ordinary. As I was tightening the last bolt, I heard the door from the house to the garage creak open. I didn't pay much attention to it, probably just Dad coming to check on me, I thought, but then I heard her voice, soft yet commanding. Hey, you're spending a lot of time in here, Linda said. As she stepped into the garage, I glanced up, and there she was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a light dress that clung to her body in ways that made it hard to ignore. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled as always, but what caught me off guard were her eyes. They were different, almost playful. Just finishing up with the bike, I said, wiping the sweat off my forehead with my arm. I tried not to stare, but there was something about her presence that just drew me in. You know, she said, walking toward me. Her heels was clicking against the concrete floor. I never really come down to the garage, but I was curious what you were up to. I laughed nervously. Yeah, not much to see here, just tools and grease. She smiled, that warm smile that always seemed to brighten up the room, but today it felt more intense. She leaned against the workbench just a couple of feet away from me. You've been working so hard lately, you deserve a break, don't you think? Her words hung in the air, and suddenly the garage felt a lot smaller. I could feel her gaze on me, and for the first time I didn't feel like she was just my dad's wife. There was something else going on. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. I turned back to the bike, pretending to tighten a bolt that didn't need any more work. You don't have to be shy around me, you know, she said, her voice softer now. I felt her hand on my shoulder and I froze. Her touch was light, almost tentative, but it sent a shiver down my spine. You've grown up so much, she whispered, her fingers trailing down my arm. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. Linda, ISH, she said, stepping closer, her body brushing against mine. It's okay. Her hand moved up to my neck, and before I could say anything, she leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, but then she deepened it, her lips warm and insistent. I couldn't process what was happening. All I knew was that I wasn't pulling away. Her hands moved to my chest, sliding under my shirt, her fingers tracing the muscles there. I felt like I was in a dream, and part of me didn't want to wake up. Linda, we shouldn't, I whispered against her lips, but she just smiled, her green eyes locking onto mine. Why not, she asked, her voice teasing. Your dad's out for the day, and it's just the two of us. Her fingers toyed with the hem of my shirt before pulling it off over my head. I was breathless, caught in a whirlwind of emotions I didn't understand, but her touch, her kisses, they were intoxicating. She pushed me back against the workbench, her lips trailing down my neck, her hands exploring my body with a confidence that left me powerless. We've got plenty of time, she whispered as her lips found mine again, her kiss more urgent now. I didn't know how we got here, how things had escalated so quickly, but in that moment none of that mattered. It was just me and her, the world outside the garage fading away as the tension between us built with every touch, every kiss. Her lips pressed against mine, soft yet hungry, as if we had both crossed some invisible line that neither of us could step back from. The garage seemed to close in around us, the air thick with tension. Her hands roamed my chest, her fingers tracing every curve and muscle, as if she had been waiting for this moment. I could feel the heat between us growing, a magnetic pull I couldn't resist. Linda, I whispered again, but this time there was no hesitation in my voice. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, desire, pure, undeniable desire. She moved closer, pressing her body against mine, and I could feel her warmth through the thin fabric of her dress. Every touch of hers made my pulse race faster. Every brush of her skin against mine made me want more. It wasn't just the physical closeness, it was the electricity in the air, the unspoken connection between us that had Been there all along but never acknowledged I've seen the way you look at me, she whispered, her lips grazing my ear. Don't think I haven't noticed. I swallowed hard, feeling my heart hammering in my chest. She was right, I had tried to ignore it, push those thoughts away, but now there was no denying it. I had been drawn to her for months, maybe even since the day she moved in, but I never allowed myself to admit it, not until now. Her hand slid lower, and I shivered at her touch, feeling the cool air against my skin, as she slowly peeled off my shirt. She took her time, savoring every moment, as if she was unwrapping a gift she had been waiting for, and maybe in a way she had been. You don't need to hold back, she whispered, her lips brushing against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I know you've wanted this just as much as I have. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. All I could do was react, my hands moving almost instinctively to her waist, pulling her closer. She smiled, a satisfied, knowing smile, as if she had been waiting for me to make the first move. Her hands tangled in my hair, and she kissed me again, this time deeper, more passionate. The world outside the garage ceased to exist, and it was just her and me caught up in the moment. Her dress slipped down her shoulders, revealing in the smooth skin beneath, and I found myself captivated by her every inch of her. She was so much older than me, but that only seemed to heighten the intensity of the moment, the forbidden nature of what we were doing. I knew it was wrong, but at the same time I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. She led me to the old couch in the corner of the garage, the one I used to sit on when I needed to clear my head. Now it was the stage for something entirely different. She sat down, pulling me with her, her eyes never leaving mine. This stays between us, she murmured, her lips inches from mine. No one needs to know, it's just you and me. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest as I leaned in to kiss her again, our bodies pressing together in a way that felt both wrong and incredibly right. Every kiss, every touch was like adding fuel to a fire, and the more we gave in, the harder it was to pull away. For what felt like hours we stayed there, wrapped up in each other, lost in the intensity of the moment. It was as if time had stopped and nothing else mattered, not my dad, not the consequences, not anything, but the way her body moved against mine, the way she whispered my name. But eventually reality began to creep back, and the sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted us both out of the moment, and we sprang apart, our breath ragged and our bodies still trembling from the intensity of what had just happened. Your dad's home, she said, her voice breathless as she quickly adjusted her dress, smoothing it down, as if nothing had happened. I grabbed my shirt and pulled it back, on my mind racing. Linda turned to me, her expression serious now, but there was still a spark in her eyes. Remember, no one can ever know about this, she whispered. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath, still trying to process everything that had just happened. As she opened the door to the house, she paused for a moment, looking back at me with a smile that sent another shiver down my spine. We'll talk later, she said softly, before slipping inside, leaving me standing there in the garage alone with my thoughts and the memory of her touch. I stood there for a moment longer, my heart still racing, wondering how everything had changed so quickly. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart heavy with everything that had just been said, but before Linda could fully walk out the door, she paused for a moment. She just stood there, her hand on the doorknob, as if she was battling with herself. Then slowly she turned back to face me, her expression softened, and instead of the finality I had felt a moment ago, there was something else, something hopeful. Look, she started, her voice tender now, I meant what I said about this being complicated, but that doesn't mean it was wrong. I wasn't expecting this. Wasn't expecting to feel this way. She stepped back toward me, sitting down next to me on the bed, closer this time. I've been fighting it too, trying to ignore it. I looked at her, searching her face. Then why does it have to end like this? She gave a small smile, her eyes twinkling with something lighter, softer. Maybe it doesn't, she whispered. Maybe it's not about what can't happen, but about what we need to figure out together. There was a moment of silence as we both absorbed the shift in the conversation. I could feel the tension starting to ease between us, replaced by something more natural, more honest. Linda reached out gently, taking my hand in hers. I don't want to lose whatever this is between us, she said softly, but we have to be careful, we have to go slow. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not your dad, but I don't want to pretend this didn't happen either. My heart lifted. Maybe it didn't have to be all or Nothing, maybe there was a way for us to explore what we felt without it being the end of everything. So what do we do? I asked, cautiously hopeful. She smiled, that warm, inviting smile of hers, and squeezed my hand. We take our time, we figure it out, no rushing into anything, no more hiding from the feelings, but we keep it between us for now until we know what we're doing. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I had hoped for. There was no need for shame or regret, there was potential. Something that could grow slowly into whatever we both wanted it to be. Linda leaned in then, and this time, when she kissed me, it wasn't filled with urge or guilt. It was soft, tender, filled with the promise of something new, a future we hadn't expected, but one that we could now explore together. She pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity. We'll figure it out, she whispered, and in that moment I knew she was right. We had time, and more importantly we had a connection, a chance to make this work, however long it might take. The heaviness I had felt earlier lifted, replaced by a lightness, a sense of possibility. As we sat there side by side, the room felt a little brighter, the weight of secrecy and guilt replaced by hope for what could come next. This was just the beginning. My name is Claire, and at 66 years old I thought I had left love behind, resigned to the notion that my heart would never again flutter with the reckless abandon of youth. But when Jake, a 20-year-old, fresh-faced and full of dreams, moved in next door, everything changed. He was a constant reminder of everything I once was and everything I still longed to feel. Little did I know that our worlds were destined to collide, igniting a passion that would transform our lives forever. It was early spring when the sun began to cast warm golden rays that melted away the remnants of winter. I stood in my garden, pruning my beloved roses with care, the sweet scent filling the air, wrapping me in nostalgia for days gone by. Spring always felt like a new beginning, and I enjoyed each moment amidst the vibrant blooms. Just as I was lost in thought, a commotion from the house next door pulled me from my reverie. I glanced up to see a young man unloading boxes from an old sedan, his movements vigorous and animated, a whirlwind of youthful energy. Need some help? I called out, unable to resist the urge to engage with the new neighbor. It was a spontaneous decision, but something about his energy sparked a flicker of excitement within me. His head snapped up, revealing bright blue eyes that sparkled with youthful mischief. Just getting settled in, I'm Jake, he beamed back at me, his smile contagious, igniting an unexpected flutter in my chest. We're all young men this vibrant. The thought felt absurd, yet it clung to me, banishing the shadows of my solitude. I'm Cla, I introduced myself. Feeling a bit flustered under his gaze, I waved, and he waved back, simple gestures, but they felt loaded with promise. As I returned to my pruning, I was acutely aware of the bright, fresh-faced boy next door, whose presence lingered in my mind long after he awakened. A part of me I thought had faded forever. Days turned into weeks, and Jake became a fixture in my thoughts and daily routines. I observed him often, whether he was skateboarding, working on his bike, or simply enjoying the sunshine. He radiated a carefree spirit that was utterly intoxicating. I found myself curious about him, what motivated him, what dreams he held close to his heart. My curiosity deepened, and I found myself seeking excuses to talk to him. One particularly warm Sunday morning, I noticed him struggling with a bicycle tire, the frustration etched on his brow as he tugged at the stubborn rubber. It was an involuntary urge to help that propelled me across the yard toward him. Do you need a hand? I called out, creating an opening before he could even respond. Would you mind? I've never been good with this stuff, he admitted sheepishly, scratching his head, his youthful charm disarming me further. Kneeling beside him, I felt a giddy thrill in our proximity. His hands were clumsy but eager to learn. We spent the afternoon laughing and struggling together, and it felt oddly normal and yet exhilarating to be doing this with someone so much younger. I found myself smiling more than I had in years. Thanks for the help, Cla, he said, handing me a cold drink afterward, his eyes sparkling. You make this seem easy. It's just practice. Anyone can do it with enough time, I replied, but I felt an unmistakable connection rooted in our shared laughter, a burgeoning kinship that I had not anticipated. Something about Jake made me feel alive again, as if I were rediscovering parts of myself long buried under layers of routine and resignation. As our interactions grew more frequent, the barriers of age and experience began to dissolve with each exchange. Our conversations became longer, brimming with shared interests and laughter. I found it so easy to talk to him, as if we had known each other forever. One afternoon we found ourselves sitting on my porch, the sun setting behind us, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the horizon. The world around us faded, and it felt as if we were in our private universe. Where did you grow up, Jake? I asked, genuinely intrigued, wanting to know more about the boy who had slipped into my life so seamlessly. He leaned back, seemingly lost in thought, watching the clouds drift. A small town a few hours from here. It was okay, but I always wanted to be somewhere lively, somewhere art and culture matter. Art, you say? My interest peaked. What kind? Mostly painting, he replied, and his enthusiasm was palpable. I love the way it lets you express emotions without using words. It's like breathing to me. I used to paint a lot, I confessed, surprised at my vulnerability, spilling forth. Life got in the way. I suppose I haven't picked up a brush in years. You should pick it up again. I'd love to see your work, he said, his face lighting up with a spark of excitement that made my heart flutter. At that moment I realized that Jake saw me as more than just a neighbor. He recognized the potential within me, something that had remained dormant for far too long. As weeks faded into a blur of shared moments and laughter, our friendship deepened into something rich with unspoken energy. I caught glimpses of longing in his eyes, and I could feel a magnetic pull between us, a simmering chemistry that was both innocent and imbued with desire. One sun-drenched afternoon, after a particularly light-hearted conversation about our favorite books, our hands brushed against each other while reaching for the same book, lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Suddenly the air was charged with anticipation. Uncertainty flickered between us, and in that heartbeat time seemed to freeze, allowing the world around us to fade into a hazy blur. My breath quickened, and I found myself at the edge of something new, something thrilling yet terrifying. Jake, I started, but my words caught in my throat as I leaned in closer, compelled by an inexplicable urge to close the gap between us. Our eyes locked, and he leaned in, brushing his lips softly against mine. It was a tentative kiss filled with hesitation, yet it ignited a fire within me that unfurled like the petals of a blooming flower. His lips were warm and surprisingly gentle, sending shivers down my spine as I deeply inhaled the moment. I pulled away, breathless, surprised at my boldness, at the sheer emotion swirling within me. I was a woman of 60 kissing a boy of 20. How could something so wrong feel so undeniably right? Doubts crept in, but the thrill of that moment pushed them aside for just a while longer. As the days turned into an intoxicating whirlwind of emotions, I wrestled with the enormity of what had just happened. The thrill of our kiss lingered like a whisper in my ear, but so did the doubts. Could this be something meaningful? Would society's gaze cast shadows over our connection? One evening I invited Jake over for dinner. My heart raced with anticipation as I set the table, the fleeting thought of what might happen next intoxicating my senses. The clinks of cutlery and the gentle light of candles created an ambience steeped in intimacy. When he arrived, his eyes lit up at the sight of the meal, and I felt a rush of warmth swelling within me. We ate and chatted about art and our shared dreams, the chemistry between us crackling with each passing moment. However, beneath this surface of joy, uncertainty brewed. He broke the momentary silence, his tone shifting to something more serious. About the kiss. Was it a mistake? I felt my heart drop at the question. No, I mean yes, I don't know. I stumbled, searching for my bearings. It was just unexpected. He leaned closer, confusion mingling with a flicker of hope in his eyes. Why can't it just be what it is? Sometimes a kiss is just a kiss, but we're not just two people, Jake. There's so much more at stake. I want you. He interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering, each word slicing through my fears. I don't care about what others think. The intensity of his words hung in the air, leaving me torn between desire and apprehension. What if they find out? What if this goes beyond a summerling? Then let's make it worth it, whatever it becomes, he urged, leaning in closer, once more, determination glowing in his gaze. Despite my fears, I found myself increasingly drawn to him, captivated by his spirit and vitality. We began to explore our connection further, allowing it to blossom while embracing whatever came next. Shared kisses transitioned into whispered confessions, our growing passion igniting something deep within both of us. One late afternoon, I suggested a spontaneous trip to a nearby art gallery. Jake lit up at the idea, and we spent hours marveling at various pieces, sharing insights and ultimately getting lost in each other's presence in a quiet corner of the gallery. A stunning painting caught my eye, a vivid landscape swirled with colors that sang to my soul. Look at that one, I nudged Jake, my heart racing, excitement bubbling within me. He leaned in closer, examining the brush strokes. It's breathtaking, he admitted, glancing sideways at me. Just like you. His words unraveled my resolve, igniting a passion I struggled to contain. We shared a moment of silence, the noise of the gallery melting into the background. Can I kiss you again? He asked softly, his voice trembling with sincerity. I nodded breathless. He leaned in, and our lips met with an urgency that felt new, exhilarating yet tender. The kiss consumed me, igniting a deep-seated longing I had pushed aside for so long. I realized then that age didn't define our connection, our feelings did. As our relationship deepened, the physical connection between us grew stronger. One evening, after a long walk together, we found ourselves back at my house, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about our lives. The conversation flowed easily, but there was a tension in the air that neither of us could ignore. As the night wore on, our touches became more frequent, more deliberate. Jake reached out and gently took my hand, his thumb brushing over my skin in a way that sent shivers through me. We moved closer, the space between us disappearing. Our lips met in a kiss that was more intense than any before, filled with a passion that neither of us could deny. We didn't stop at just kissing this time. His hands began to explore, tracing the curves of my body with a tenderness that made me feel cherished and desired. I responded in kind, my own hands moving over him, feeling the warmth of his skin through his shirt. We lost ourselves in the moment, letting the world outside fade away as we gave into the connection we had been building. However, reality has a knack for rearing its head just when you think you finally found your rhythm. One evening, I attended a neighborhood gathering, a community event I often found solace in despite its predictable atmosphere. But that night I encountered whispers of disapproval swirling around me like a storm as I navigated the crowd. Overhearing snide remarks about my relationship with Jake, I felt the heat of embarrassment creep up my cheeks. Did you hear Claire's with that young guy? One woman sneered, prompting laughter that felt like daggers. How desperate can you get? Another chimed in, and my heart sank at their words. Jake was nearby, and sensing my discomfort, he quickly excused himself to join me on the balcony, where I sought refuge to breathe. Things will settle down, Jake said, concern etched across his face as he took in the situation. It's not just gossip, Jake. What if they're right? My voice trembled, panic washing over me. What if this really is just a fantasy? He stepped closer, grabbing my shoulders, gently grounding me. It's not a fantasy if it's real for us. We can't let others' opinions dictate our happiness. I've been alone for so long. Maybe I'm misreading all of this, I admitted, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Then let's redefine what we are, he said earnestly, grounding me with his steady gaze. You mean more to me than whispers. Let's make it real. His conviction resonated within me, stalked the fire of my resolve. Perhaps love was worth fighting for, even in the face of judgment. Days turned into weeks, and we found ourselves more intertwined than we had ever expected. Kisses deepened, and we became partners in a shared exploration of not only our connection, but also ourselves. It felt like we were writing our own story, filled with pages emblazoned with longing, laughter, and liberation. One rainy Saturday, we stayed in for a cozy afternoon, painting together, laughter echoing through my living room. Colors swirled on the canvas as vibrant as our emotions, a chaotic harmony that reflected our newfound connection. Jake mixed colors with enthusiasm, his youthful spirit reflected in every stroke of the brush. You're talented, Claire, he said, genuinely admiring my work. You've taught me to see things differently, to look deeper. Thank you, Jake, I replied, feeling the warmth spread through me. You've encouraged parts of me I thought were lost. We moved closer, the tension between us palpable. Our lips met softly, the kiss deepening into something more fervent. We explored each other's touches, savoring the closeness that had become so important to us. It was a moment of intense intimacy where every brush of our lips and touch of our hands felt like a promise, awakening the longing I had buried for so long. I don't want to hide anymore, I whispered against his lips, my heart racing at the admission. Then don't, he replied, his eyes glimmering with Determination lets be us whatever that looks like as winter settled in and snowflakes danced outside. We forged a path of love that blended my maturity with his youthful enthusiasm. I felt alive again, craving the sweetness that came with our relationship. We faced challenges openly, embracing them, while pushing against societal norms to carve a new existence together. One introspective evening, as we enjoyed a quiet dinner at my house, I turned to him, feeling a surge of courage. "Jake, I care about you deeply, but I have to ask, what do you see for us in the future?" He paused, his expression thoughtful, as if weighing the significance of the moment. "I see us exploring together, learning about each other, growing through whatever comes our way. You inspire me," he said, each word pregnant with sincerity. "What do I inspire you to do?" I pressed, curiosity fueling my need to know. "What I meant to him, to be fearless," he responded, raw emotion lacing his voice, "to take life by the reins, and not be afraid of the journey ahead." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes at his words, and I reached for his hand across the table, feeling the warmth spread through me, illuminating the uncertainty that had clouded my heart for so long. "If I choose this, if I choose us, it has to be all-encompassing," I said quietly, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "It can be," he assured me, his smile illuminating the room. "I'm all in, Cla. I want to share my life with you." As the months rolled on, our shared dreams began to crystallize, transforming into something meaningful and enduring. We chased sunsets, painted murals, and danced beneath a canopy of stars, crafting our little world filled with laughter and tender moments. One balmy evening, we ventured to our favorite spot, a quiet hill overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking. The city lights sparkled like stars below, a reflection of the hope and joy we had ignited in each other. Wrapped in each other's arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, one that had eluded me for so long. "You know, I never thought I'd find something like this at my age," I confessed, gazing out at the horizon where the sky met the earth in a gentle embrace. "Why not? Love is timeless," he replied, turning to face me, his eyes shimmering with affection. "See it as a gift, Cla. It's never too late to experience something beautiful, right?" I laughed softly, feeling the warmth of his presence surrounding me. At that moment I realized that age carried no weight in the pursuit of happiness. It was merely a number, an abstract concept that couldn't confine the depths of our connection. As I leaned in for a kiss, the world around us faded into oblivion. The gentle warmth of his lips against mine anchored me firmly in the present, where we were simply Claire and Jake, two hearts intertwined in a beautiful dance of love that defied convention. By opening my heart to a younger man, I discovered a world brimming with joy, laughter, and deep emotional connection. As I looked at Jake, I saw not just a younger version of myself, but a partner who complemented my layers of experience with his vibrant spirit and fresh perspectives. Our relationship challenged the definitions of love and companionship while celebrating the beauty inherent in human connection. With Jake, I experienced a love that transcended conventional boundaries, one that proved that passion flows freely when hearts dare to be brave. As we walked hand in hand into the future, I understood that love in all its forms is worth pursuing, nurturing, and celebrating regardless of the years that separate us. Life had surprised me yet again, and I was ready to embrace the adventure that lay ahead, not just for myself but for us together. With each passing day, I learned to cherish not just the unpredictability of life but also the exhilarating freedoms that love offers. Age may have brought wisdom and scars, but it was Jake's youthful spirit that illuminated my world, and together we painted a future rich with endless possibilities. In the end, we found solace not in what others thought or what society dictated, but in the moments that made our hearts race and our souls sing. Love, it turns out, is not bound by age. It is an eternal dance, a tapestry waiting to be woven anew with each courageous embrace, filled with new experiences, laughter, and the joy of discovering each other. Claire and Jake embarked on a journey where dreams were not limited by age and where the heart reigns sovereign over societal expectations. Their love story, unique and beautiful, became a testament to the timelessness of love, a resplendent reminder that life's most profound connections often bloom in the unlikeliest of places. Together they painted a canvas of love, color, and passion, an artwork of life not bound by time but inspired by the courage to embrace change.